Welcome to the PowerCat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
And we're in the wrong pack. Hold on, I got changed. It's not the PowerCat Podcast, guys. I just had a senior moment. Hold on. We're Brand. Okay, we're folks. Welcome to the podcast. There's 21 of you to witness this. Here we go.
Welcome to the K-State Insiders, your Kansas State sports show. Now, let's head into the studio.
I need an off week. Tim Fitzgerald with Ryan Gilbert, Cole Carmody, Ryan Wallace, and our guest tonight is a guy named Joey, but better known as Bob Trollsby, one of the hosts of the Cocaine Willie podcast. I'm waiting for 24/7 to say, you really shouldn't use that word, but it's the name of the show.
It is. And it's funny the amount of people we've had to warn, maybe don't put that in your show description on YouTube when we go on. But hey, we haven't gotten in trouble yet, and we've only been shadow banned once, and it was for playing an Iowa State game in real time and doing a watch along. So
yeah, that'll do it.
That'll do it.
They don't like that. They don't like that. We keep getting dinged for stuff I have licenses for, and then I have to fight it. YouTube's very diligent. I'll give them that. Speaking of diligent, Kansas State found a way to win on Saturday, 29-27 in the Abolition Bowl. I'm just not going to play nice. And it wasn't impressive. And I want to start with our guest, Bob Trollsby. Look, they won. And really, at the end of the day, that's what matters. But that was a frustrating game.
It was. And I think it's one of those games where, in retrospect, we're going to look back at this game in 10 years and think, wow, that was a nice back and forth matchup between K-State and KU. But in the moment, it's like, oh my God, this is one of the most frustrating things that I've ever experienced watching. And I think it does say a lot about this team and the culture to be able to pull out a win against KU in that fashion, to pull out the win against Tulane in the fashion that they did. They're coming out on the right side of a lot of these one-score games this year where that wasn't the case last year. And there was a season 2 years ago where they found ways to win 2 years ago. And what did that lead to? That led to a Big 12 championship appearance and win. So I think it continues to bolster this team's ability when they face adversity. They've been in that situation in the past. They've been in those situations and they've come out as the victor in those one-score games. So I feel very confident about this team's ability when they face those situations in the future, potentially at Iowa State, potentially in some of these matchups that coming down the pipe didn't look like they were going to be challenges when we started the season. And alas, here we are with a Cincinnati team that's won 5 games, an Arizona State team that's won 5 games. These are going to get interesting here the next few weeks, but I feel confident about where the team's at based on that appearance.
Yeah, that's a topic I want to get to, how upside down the Big 12 is. And suddenly K-State's got the remarkably challenging schedule that we didn't see coming. Ryan Wallace, what alarm bells went off for you on Saturday?
Oh, I mean, it was a little maddening to watch from the standpoint. I felt like everything that was working at the end of the game could have worked towards the beginning of the game. And so I don't know if coaches were trying to tee stuff up, but it was kind of maddening of like, yeah, Jalen Daniels really isn't very good under pressure, but let's not blitz him until like the fourth quarter. Let's not send multiple guys his way until the fourth quarter. So that was maddening. Dylan Edwards' usage is still maddening. I know Brien Hanley and myself and you guys are kind of like, exhausting that topic, so I won't go down it anymore. But the kind of excuses that I've heard through the grapevine are, I think, what's the word? Like, I'm just not going to accept them anymore. If I hear if what I'm hearing is true about the potential of like playbook type stuff, then, it's just not an excuse anymore to me. And
Agree.
I'm going to say it this way because I think you'll have some folks that'll say, well, by now, like a player should know the playbook. If those reports are true, right? Even so, we heard all offseason how they were going to try and find packages for guys that don't have to know the full extent of the playbook. So again, if any of those reports are true, it's still maddening that he's not out there more often, even as a decoy, but I won't go down that road. Fitz, to get back to your question, though, to hone in on something specifically, I feel like, and again, I should preface this by saying credit to KU's defensive line. We talked about that on the pregame show. Their defensive tackles have been really good this year, and I thought they were really good again on Saturday night. But this offensive line looked for a minute there like they were really starting to come together, and the last 2 weeks haven't been terrific. With West Virginia, I felt like the pass protection was good, but the run blocking was not. Again, against KU, there were times where the pass protection was good, but the run blocking is not. I know they're loading the box. I know they're doing some things to frustrate and add more, guys to block and account for, but they just seem like they're getting pushed around a little bit more, Fitz, and that's not, exactly what you want to see heading down the stretch of the season. I thought they would be getting better, and it seems like they're taking minor steps back. And again, I know some of that is because of what the defensive alignment is showing them. But I was hopeful. I thought that things were really starting to come together, and it having me question a little bit down the stretch.
Cole?
So you guys know that famous quote from Denny Green, rest his soul, rest in peace, from Arizona Cardinals. Fitz, you don't know that quote. They are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook. That's kind of how I feel like this game was for KU, except they didn't let them off the hook. That would have been, had K-State lost, an all-time Chris Kleiman pull out there, because I have a feeling that he would have, in other words, spoken something along those same lines, because, this was the typical KU game. And again, I'm not taking anything away from K-State, but this was the typical KU game. And so when you look at it from that perspective, we shouldn't be surprised. KU has had a chance to win every single game they've played in this year. There's a realistic chance. There is a world that exists where they are 6-2 instead of 2-6. But they followed the exact same script that KU has followed all season long. They had a lead in the fourth quarter, and they let it slip away. Now, you have to credit K-State for taking advantage of that. But, we can jokingly say this is the best 2-6 team of all time. But, there literally can be you could make an assumption that literally this might be the best 2-6 team of all time, because they've had a lead in all of the games that they've lost. And so, I credit K-State for finding a way to win when they played probably their C+ type game. But this is who KU is. And so I wasn't surprised that K-State won, because KU found a way to lose. And that's not taking anything away from K-State, but KU just found a way to lose.
Yep. Ryan Gilbert, your thoughts?
My biggest thing is K-State found a way to win. Now, KU certainly helped matters, absolutely, but this was one of my takeaways in our 5 things we learned piece, was that K-State just found a way to win. Good teams find ways to win. The Jayhawks, certainly without a doubt gave K-State some gifts, but that safety play, the players talked about this today on Monday, Damian Elalio stopping that run, that wasn't just a fluke that K-State somehow was able to stuff them in the backfield, right? K-State was going out and making plays. The fumble at the end to set up the Chris Tennant kick, right? Austin Romaine forcing it out and Brendan Mott being right there for it. By all means, KU helped out matters without a doubt, but good teams just somehow, despite an ugly game, can find ways to win. And I know, Wally, you touched on some of the bad, the ugly. There was a lot of things to not like from Kansas State, but at the end of the day, you're playing at home, a rivalry game. Just make one more play than your opponent, and that's what K-State did. So it wasn't pretty, but good teams find ways to do that.
Yep. You're right. Kansas is the best 58-minute football team in America. It's its last 2 that suck. They can't handle that. And I thought K-State let them compete. As Wally said, they didn't bring the sellout blitz until late in the game, when honestly they had to, and it worked. If they had tried it earlier in the game, they might have discovered how well it worked and done it more. If they had realized Dylan Edwards was going places every time he touched the ball, they might have given him more shots. And let's go there. Joey, Dylan Edwards was effective and yet only carried the ball 3 times. Give me the Cocaine Willie stance on the use of Dylan Edwards.
I don't want to speak for the other two guys, but I know we are all big Dylan Edwards fans. Like I'm a Wichita guy originally, and I live in Denver, Colorado. So I am near Boulder, and I heard a lot about Dylan Edwards last year, and there was a lot of excitement in that program and around the fan base about Dylan Edwards. So us getting him back after, prodigal son style, he comes back to K-State, and I was beyond stoked for the potential that he was going to bring to this team just because of how dynamic of an athlete he is. I mean, he was one of the fastest high school athletes in his recruiting class. That in and of itself, I mean, you look at it on the Chiefs with Xavier Worthy, the dude clocks, he's the fastest. As long as he can get separation, no one's going to catch him unless they've got the right angle and just happen to be in the right spot. It's going to be the same situation with Dylan Edwards. It's a little surprising to me that we haven't quite figured out how to leverage him effectively yet. But when we do leverage him, when we're not just trying to run him up the gut between the tackles and he gets stuffed at the line of scrimmage, he's finding space. He's making plays happen. So I think our stance as a pod, at least my stance individually, is I would love to see Dylan Edwards have the ball more. I would love to see him in the 20 touches range, if not more. But again, Chef has brought this up on our pod before. When you have as many dynamic athletes as we thought we were going to have coming into this season, you also have to be able to spread that out a little bit. So you're not going to have one guy hogging the ball when you've got DJ Giddens, at one point was leading the conference in rushing yards. So you don't want to take away from his ability to eat against defenses that he's going to eat against as well. And Jace Brown has proven to be a very solid dynamic wide receiver as well. So it becomes hard, and I don't envy the position that the coaching staff is in to try to distribute snaps away that they do or that they have to. But I would love to see Dylan get the ball more, just because he has proven when he gets the ball in his hands, whether it's through the passing game or in the rushing game, he's going to make plays happen as long as you're not trying to just run him up the gut, because I feel like that's proven to be relatively ineffective in most of the games I've seen so far.
Wally, I don't want to stir up trouble with a team that is now 7-1, but if they're still trying to indicate that Dylan doesn't know the playbook well enough, I think that falls on the coaches at this point, that you can't put enough in for him to be effective 8 weeks into the season, actually 9, we count the off week. I'm a little baffled by it. And I would recommend that they use the off week to make sure he has effective ways to touch the ball, because they're going to need that next step to get where they want to go, which is Arlington. Mm-hmm. As we pointed out, those 2 games we thought would be easy with Arizona State and Cincinnati at the start of the year, they're not going to be. They both have some pretty good weapons, including a great running back at Arizona State. And, of course, going to Ames, Iowa in November is like invading Finland. You don't want to do it in the winter. And I just think they're going to have to find a way to take this offense to the next level. And the next level is Dylan Edwards, and it's sitting right in front of him, Wally.
Well, and that's what, like, earlier in the season, the excuse, I think it was maybe after Tulane, or maybe even Arizona, I can't remember. I don't know, maybe it was BYU, but the question got brought up at the press conference with Chris Klieman, and he kind of steered it. Do you remember, Fitz, with the whole, we're not getting enough snaps?
Yeah. That, like, snaps are down across college football, and kind of went that route. And again, at that time, I wasn't crazy about that excuse, because, like, okay, you still had 70, 80, however many snaps in that game, and you, at that point, you still chose to only play him 15 or 20% of those snaps. Even if you want to have more snaps, like, we're just talking about usage here. Now, again, maybe there's kind of, again, some stuff that I'm hearing about reasoning regarding, how much he knows the playbook, whatever. I'll go to this, though. In the comments, the circular asks, well, who gets less touches to give Edwards more? Any wide receiver not named Jace Brown and Keegan Johnson, period, end of story. Like, to me, it's pretty simple. You have Keegan and Jace that, have shown. Keegan was super tough on Saturday night. There were times I thought maybe they should just take him off the field, because I'm like, he's got nothing left. He's getting crushed over the middle. And yet they kept putting him in there. And, he would prove me wrong time and time again by, hauling in tough catches, or, taking a beating and then drawing a flag or something. So, I mean, I think Keegan, his veteran presence out there, clearly there's a role for him to be on the field.
Jace Brown, obviously, as we've talked about already, there's a place for him on the field. The tight ends, I think there's places and roles for them to be on the field. Beyond that, I don't know. We're not saying take DJ Giddens off the field. And I wonder, Fitz, if maybe that's where the coaches are struggling with this, is like, well, we don't want to take DJ off because he's earning these.
Right.
We're not asking you to take DJ off.
No.
Put them both on the field. You can, how many times have we said it? You can split Dylan out to the slot. You can keep him in the backfield. You can split Dylan out and you have your 3 receiver set. There's a lot of things that they could be doing. And again, for whatever reason, it's maddening that they don't want to, when he's clearly their most dynamic weapon at this point, not named Jace Brown or DJ Giddens, I guess.
It's frustrating. Cole, solve this problem for me.
Okay, I will. But first, I want to address something, Fitz. You said it's like invading Finland in the wintertime. I'm going to put my history cap on here and
Norway,
say,
wasn't it?
well, that reference actually should have been Russia, because Napoleon and Hitler both did that and they both lost. So you should have said invading Russia. So I'm going to have to mark you off, but you can always come in to retake your test.
Nope. It's Finland. The Germans tried to invade and had a lot of problems because of their winter troops that could ski and shoot.
It's like when it wasn't over until the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor, right?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. And they snuck up on us.
So here's where I'm at, guys. There's 2 things that I want to bring up. So the first thing is, do you guys recall in the beginning, 4th of the season? Because I feel like with these 2 bye weeks, we can kind of split it up. You have your non-conference, you have your games until the bye, and then you have that middle period, and then you have that final period. So I look at it in kind of 4-game increments. And in the first 4-game increments, it felt like they were trying to figure out who they wanted to play receiver. They were trying to figure out who they were trying to get touches to. So we saw a lot of Sterling Lockett. We saw a lot of Dante Cephas, Trace Spivey. They were trying to kind of figure out how to use Dylan and DJ. Well, now in this next 4 games, they kind of started to figure it out. These are the guys that are the ones who are deserving of the touches. Well, I feel like for the final few games of the season, there has to be some tinkering there because other teams are figuring out personnel. Other teams are figuring out formationally, hey, when this guy comes into the game, this is what their tendencies are. And so the offense is going to have to adjust at some point. And I feel like this would be the perfect time if you want to feature Dylan Edwards more. There's no better time than now, because this is a time to bring him in formations that other teams have not seen yet. You know what he can do. Give him the ball. And again, as you said, Wally, if it's not just Dylan, it's other guys as well. Teams are going to start adjusting to what K-State is doing. And so eventually they're going to have to adjust back. Well, now would be the perfect time to do that and try and get number 3 the ball a little bit more often.
Ryan Gilbert, do you have anything to help us further enlighten this topic?
And you guys all hit it on the head with regards to Dylan and DJ. No, I mean, again, like, we're not asking for Dylan to get more touches per se. We just want to see him on the field more. That does not have to at all take away from Giddens' usage or his touches.
So true. You're going to suffer now from a old man doing old man jokes as a host. I feel like if they named Elon Musk the offensive coordinator, he could solve this problem, because that dude knows how to get players in space. And as MT says, just get him in space. I don't know what that space travel has to do with it, but Elon could do it. But I agree. Just create opportunities. I'm gonna further my old man thing here. Bill Snyder's entire offense wasn't based on anything other, whether it was when he was in the spread in his early years or when he went to the quarterback run game and what's now known as the Wildcat formation in later years. It was all about creating one-on-one matchups and how to isolate defenders into bad positions against more talented athletes, which K-State didn't always have at the time. And he found a way to do that through both either spreading it out with receivers or spreading it out with potential ball carriers and outnumbering you with the quarterback run game. That this staff isn't kind of addressing that. That's the core of all football, is to get players into one-on-one engagements they can win. And they're in love with running between the tackles, which has worked a lot. They didn't really get running on Saturday until they let DJ get off tackle. Exactly. And then it started to break up a little bit. Dylan Edwards solves a lot of this, because if you can get him into space against one-on-one players, he's going to win that battle quite often. Even on his long run, it was 3-on-1 in front of him, and the one was Jackson, and he missed his block, and that guy tackled Dylan. Get him in space and make the defense adjust to him, and play a little smarter with this. Now, I see people criticizing Connor Riley as offensive coordinator. Wally, we need to point out that K-State has one of the best averages per play yardage in the Big 12, if not the country. They have been efficient on offense. They struggled early, but as of late, they're putting up some serious numbers. Folks, they had 400 and I got to find it there, 479 in yardage on Saturday. So the lack of conversion into points wasn't because of a lack of moving the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, let's also, be honest again. The KU defense is a formidable outfit there. I think their secondary played a lot better than I expected, at least at safety. I thought their linebackers played tons better than I expected. I think getting Cornell Wheeler back was big for them. JB Brown was terrific. Like I said, their D-line pushed K-State around a little bit. So, it made Connor Riley's job harder. It's a lot easier to go out there with a game plan against a defense like West Virginia's, and they load the box and you say, well, we're just going to throw on you. And so they did, and then KU comes out and was a little bit more balanced and made Connor Riley work for it a little bit more. So, I'm the issue isn't with Connor Riley, like not knowing how to scheme. Like clearly they know how to put yards up. To me, it's more just about kind of the substitution patterns.
Right.
And it's about kind of when to go to certain stuff. Because you can see him go to it, but then you're kind of wondering, like you said, Fitz, with the off tackle stuff, like feels like you could have gone to that sooner. Feels like you could have been using that more and then forced them to adjust. It just feels like a lot of times Connor Riley's very good, and really maybe K-State in general, more often than not, they're a really good coaching staff in the reactionary. And I think a lot of times we'd like to see them dictate and be more the proactive ones and be a little bit more aggressive off the start, knowing that they're clearly good enough to figure things out on the fly. They can then turn back around and adjust if their initial kind of aggressive game plan or proactive game plan doesn't work. And I think a lot of times they kind of want to make the opponent show their hand first. And a lot of times that kind of leaves them more in scramble mode midway, late into games before then kind of, I don't want to say the light bulb goes on. But yeah, there's some of that, Fitz. And I think some of it too, and Cole, you can correct me here if I'm wrong, kind of being in a coach's office is like, I think we can't also kind of underestimate the standpoint of kind of wanting to tee stuff up so that a defense has to then account for that when you show it to them later. And then you kind of do the kind of offset of that play. Where I don't want Connor Riley to go is at times we saw that with Colin Klein, where it was almost to a stubborn level of teeing stuff up and then never going to it. So Connor seems to be doing a much better job than in that regard. But Fitz, I just want to see them be a little bit more proactive and not reactive all the time.
I agree. And Mr. Trollsby, one of the things that Trollsby, did I say Trollsbury? I just made up a new name for you, Trollsby, that I was really troubled by something Wally mentioned. Setting the yardage aside where K-State did run the ball for more than KU controlled the line of scrimmage for most of that game. And somehow K-State found a way to win, but it made it very difficult because K-State was struggling to run it and KU was running it efficiently enough to give K-State issues.
Yeah, and going into the matchup last week, I think, Wally, you said it best. They were a much more balanced defense going into the matchup last week than I think like a West Virginia was going into that one, because it was pretty obvious where K-State was going to win against West Virginia. But KU, they're not the best defense in the conference. They're not the best defense in the country, but they are fairly balanced in their approach. They're not super weak in one area necessarily compared to another. So that kind of worked in their advantage. We did rush the ball and we got some good yardage there, but at the same time, I'm more so looking forward to this matchup against Houston because similar to that matchup against West Virginia, Houston has struggled against rushing teams so far this season. And that's something that, when you got DJ, when you've got Dylan Edwards, that's something where K-State's certainly going to have a little bit more of an advantage there. And hopefully we'll be able to right some of the wrongs from last week. But yeah, I agree.
Yep. And we're looking like we're going to be playing in rain down there. So having an ability to run the ball might be more important than ever. Cole, should we leak out to KU what exactly they're doing wrong in the last 2 minutes? I have no idea, but if you know, could you tell them? Because now K-State fans are in an interesting position of rooting for Utah and Kansas to win some football games because there are some key matchups here. My daily delivery today was on the oddity that Kansas State not only plays the other 3 of the top 4 teams, BYU, Colorado, and Iowa State this season, they play them all on the road. And on the other hand, Kansas State is the only team the other 3 play. They don't play each other. So K-State's going to need some help if they want any more wiggle room, because getting enough help with a second loss may not be possible, but let's try maybe. And
guys, I don't know if you saw this or not, but Lance Leipold's post-game press conference at Bill Snyder Family Stadium was, I think, quite interesting. Our colleague Michael Swain over from Fog.net at 24/7 had asked Lance Leipold a question about, hey, what do you coach your guys on when they have that ball that's getting ready to go out of bounds on the kickoff? And Lance started talking, and he said, you know what? That's not a good question. Why would you even ask that, Michael? And it was one of those things where I watched that, and it kind of struck me a certain way. And
that's think a great question.
It is a great question.
It's a fair question.
Very fair question. And then he had asked him, what did you see on that last drive? And as Fitz so nicely pointed out, he said, I'm not going to curse on this, a crap load of blitzing. And that's fairly accurate. But I think it just kind of goes to show that there's some, I don't want to say frustration in that Kansas locker room. Maybe it's just, I have no idea what to do type of attitude if you're Lance Leipold, because you've exhausted all of your resources. You've literally tried to do everything and you still can't get over that hump. And so, yeah, K-State finds himself in an interesting situation, because for Kansas, it's one of those things where, are they ready to give up on the season, or is Lance Leipold going to be able to right the ship and find a way to go win those games? Because, guys, I don't know if you've looked at the standings recently, not that we do this for a living or anything, but realistically, BYU has to lose 3 games in order for it to actually end up mattering for K-State, which isn't going to happen. That won't happen. And Iowa State has to lose 3 games for it to actually matter for K-State. And I don't think that's going to happen. And so K-State finds themselves in a very interesting spot. But I just think, you know what? If you're a K-State fan, just focus on your team, because I think at this point, watching other games and hoping for losses does nothing.
Agree. And as someone pointed out here, you just got to take care of business. Here we go. Purple Freak. We don't need KU to do anything. Just take care of business, and we are good. And that is the truth. You can't rely on anyone. You got to go take care of it. We spent so much time talking about tiebreakers last year that they don't really matter right now. I mean, just keep this in mind. You lose the tiebreaker to BYU. So if they have 1 loss and you have 1 loss, they win. I mean, you need to take care of your business, because Cole's right. They're not going to lose 3 games. Neither is Iowa State. Ryan Gilbert, let's open up a new topic, and that's Chris Klieman's health. A little scare on Saturday. We didn't know what was going on up the press box until someone, said it on the radio. Matt Walters had noted it, that Chris Kleiman had gone into the locker room. Another time he was on a knee drinking Gatorade type drink. He thought after the game it was, he was getting dizzy, and it's happened before. Today he talked about maybe he has a virus or a bug. I don't care what it is. Someone's told me he doesn't eat on game day. He doesn't really drink enough water, and that's probably the solution. But it is worrisome, man. You got a coach out there about ready to faint. And trust me, I've been in the press box about ready to faint, but that's usually because the team sucks that I'm covering. He just was struggling, lightheaded, and being lightheaded on the sidelines got to be a little concerning.
Yeah, good news that Kleiman is all good, but it sucked to hear him say that Asa Newsom was out for the year. And I know
Yeah.
he's not a starter, anything like that, but that's just a young man that literally cannot catch a break. But and there's full faith, full trust in Van Malone or Matt Wells, right? Kind of the next people in charge. But you don't want that happening. And maybe Kleiman, I mean, his problem is rushing too fast to officials when he wants to call a timeout, right? He may be exerting too much energy on those plays, but glad he's doing good. But certainly something that we were monitoring over the last couple of days, right?
I may have suggested to him that he wears one of the catapult holsters that his team does, so that someone can monitor his blood pressure, probably not blood pressure, heart rate and all that stuff. But also we can track the speed at which he runs. Also, I'd kind of like him to only wear that on the sidelines on the upper half. I think it'd be a real fashion statement that he can coach in essentially a sports bra. I don't know why that was important to me, but it is. Look, Joey, this team still isn't where it can be. It still isn't as good as it can be. It's been progressing that way. I thought Saturday was a little bit step back, not to the problem that I'm really worried about. I thought KU was really well prepared and was the cause of a lot of those problems. But now they need to go take care of business. They need to just emphatically win a game, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And we all knew that KU was going to give K-State their best shot in that matchup with the energy of the rivalry, with them returning the guys that they've returned this season. The amount of seniors on that team is pretty large number. I want to say they returned 15 of 22 starters on both sides of the ball, something like that. So we knew they were going to give us their best shot, and they certainly did. So how much of that is K-State, taking a step back, and how much of that is KU played the best game they could have possibly played against us? Well, you could make an argument they didn't, because they left a lot of points on the board, but at the same time, they did, they did give you your best shot. But that said, you bring up a great point, and I've alluded to it or hinted at it a little bit already, but Houston is not a good team. I'm just going to call a spade here. They didn't even have this guy starting at quarterback until a week or 2 weeks ago, Zion Chris, and he's not looking good. Their offense is not looking good. I think he threw 61 yards last week, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 45 on the ground, and 2 fumbles, which is just a great stat line for a quarterback, giving the ball away 3 times there. But I mean, they didn't have a receiver over 30 yards last week. Their offense looks incredibly anemic when you look at every single, passing or rushing. They just don't look like a very good football team. So I think this is a great opportunity for the defense to potentially shut them out, and for our offense to go out there. And I've already mentioned it. They're looking at advanced stats here from College Football Insiders, which is my go-to resource for a lot of these advanced stats. An EPA per play against the rush, they're currently 77th out of 140 or 134 teams in FBS. So they're certainly not a great rushing defense, which plays to K-State's advantage, especially when you have the dynamic athleticism of a quarterback like Avery Johnson, when you have DJ Giddens, knowing what we've seen the potential of DJ Giddens can be. And when you got a guy in Dylan Edwards, where Cole, you mentioned it, he has an opportunity in this game to have a real breakout game. And if the coaching staff can figure out how to leverage him appropriately, he could have a massive game on Saturday, and this could be the Dylan Edwards game. So that's what I'm certainly hoping for in this matchup. But it's going to be, I hope, in a situation where it's a K-State blowout.
Wally, you texted me during the game on Saturday that it's clear Avery isn't as healthy as they kind of indicated he might be.
I don't think so.
He was running a little bit reluctantly at times, instead of that confident runner who cuts back and cuts it back into the field and runs past people. I feel like the Houston game offers him an opportunity to feature Dylan Edwards and DJ Giddens and even Joe Jackson, and try to shelve Avery another week. If you can shelve him this week and go into an off week, maybe he'll be close to 100% for the home stretch of this season. But you should be able to go down there and run the ball and run it effectively with other guys in this game. And, at best case scenario, they get away in the third quarter and it opens it up, and you can put in Roberson and or Knuth to finish it out, to really rest him, to get him ready for the home stretch. But we don't think Avery's quite there with his health, do we?
It just didn't look like it to me. he didn't look as fast as he normally does. But I think more importantly, when I was watching him, when he did get free and get loose, he looked like he was looking for the path of least resistance. And I don't mean in like running lane style. I mean like the amount of contact that he might or might not take. I saw him look to the outside a couple times, and then the one run that I can think that I thought, man, he's going to, let it loose here, that he did cut back into the field. He slid, and we've seen him slide before, but I mean, he gave himself up like extra early. I mean, you could tell he didn't want to take any contact at all. So I think he's much, much better than he's been, than he was at Colorado, better probably than he was at West Virginia, where they felt comfortable with him running and he felt comfortable running. But there was kind of that next gear that he just didn't look to have. Whether he has it back against Houston or not, I think, as Joey said, as you said, I don't know if it'll matter, so long as that they, come out. The blueprint's there, really. I mean, it's feature DJ Giddens, feature Dylan Edwards early and often, get this offensive line some confidence back that they can move the line of scrimmage on the ground, try and force Houston to put more guys in the box, and then it's right back to West Virginia all over again, where you just go over the top. And as you said, we saw against West Virginia that offered a lot of stretches down the end of that game for a ton of substitutions. So this would be a great opportunity for K-State to do that. And then go into a bye and kind of get fresh again at a number of different positions, including quarterback.
I agree. Cole, if I had one concern, and Gills, I want you to weigh in on this too, is that going into the 9th game of the season, and going through a really tough 4-game stretch right now between off weeks. Colorado was a war. West Virginia was less that, but still a real test, another night game. Come home for your rival. And then you finish it off with Houston. And my fear is they'll take a breath and they'll think, let's cruise through this and get to the bye week. And that's a good formula in the Big 12 to not cruise through a game, is to think you will. I don't think there's really a realistic, of course, Houston could win. I just don't think it's that serious of a threat. But turning this into a really challenging football game, I think, is possible, and they really could use an easy win here.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what Houston's done so far, and I mean, the TCU, I guess, looks like a nice win. I mean, going into Fort Worth and knocking off the Horned Frogs, I think that's a good win for Houston. Houston was one of those teams at the beginning of the year that I was a little higher on than everybody else. I want to say their win-loss in Vegas was 3.5, and I really like the over for them, and I think they have a great chance to hit that. They play K-State, then they go on the road to Arizona, who's in free fall, then they get Baylor at home, then they close the season at BYU. I think they got a good chance to win one of these next 4 games and hit that over. But again, this is the same Houston team that was absolutely destroyed by Cincinnati 34-0, lost to Iowa State 20-0. That's 54-0 in 2 games, and then turn around and beat TCU, but lose to KU 42-14. I mean, they've been so up and down, you really don't know what you're going to get. And so I look at this game, and I think, honestly, the fact that this game, it's on the road, which I think is scary for K-State, but not because of the home crowd environment, guys. If you go look on Vivid Seats right now, anybody who's in the Texas area, go ahead and make the drive to Houston, because you can sit in the second row behind the K-State bench for less than $50. And honestly, you could probably buy a $9 ticket, is the cheapest ticket right now, and move down to the lower bowl. And so there's going to be absolutely nobody at this game, which is a little scary, because it turns into one of those things to where those players live on the energy of the crowd. They've lived on the energy of the crowd at West Virginia, at Colorado, home against Kansas. And guys, it essentially turns into a high school crowd. I mean, I don't think that's going to mess with anybody, but there's going to be no juice there. And so if there's any kind of momentum for Houston, then the doubts start to creep in, because you're like, well, we're just playing bad. From a player's perspective, well, you have nobody to blame. It's not we're losing because of the atmosphere. It's losing because we're playing bad. And so you would hope that maybe that the team would find a way to stay focused, even with that little crowd. But it's going to be an interesting dynamic, and it kind of feels like, to make a baseball reference, your team's going to play the Oakland A's, and you know that they're not any good. But guess what? As Big B always says, the other team gives out scholarships too, and finding a way to stay focused in this game is going to be key. I think K-State will be fine because they have Chris Kleiman. But you know what? If I'm an outsider, I'm circling this game and saying, you know what, this could be an interesting game.
Did you just predict that the Houston Cougars are moving to Las Vegas? Because that'd be a radical decision to play your home games in Las Vegas when you're based in Houston.
They should just move to the Coliseum. Nobody's going to be there, so move to Oakland.
Well, nobody's been there for years. That's the problem. Gil's thoughts on this team losing sight? Let's remember, Willie Fritz coached Tulane past K-State just 2 seasons ago. He's got a blueprint out there. Maybe not the same players, but he knows how to do it.
Yeah, same coaches, same culture. I get that. And Kleiman had really good things to say about just his relationship, right, with Willie Fritz. And they're not going to be putting this team, they're not going to be taking Houston lightly. But back to what you kind of mentioned, Fitz, with the look ahead, maybe a trap game with the bye week. I just don't really buy into that for this K-State team. Everybody knows I like to sports bet. One of the biggest things that I look for is what happened in a previous week. And always, whether you play good, whether you play bad, whether you're a good team or a bad team, teams always just kind of return to the mean, right? If you play awful, your next week's not going to be as bad. If you blow somebody out, maybe you come back down to earth a little bit. And so K-State, thank God, its wake-up call in an ugly game, where K-State had a lot of mishaps and miscues. They were lucky, fortunate maybe to come out with a victory. And so, coming into this Houston game, I'd expect them to kind of get back to playing the way that they did, say, at West Virginia in the second half, at home against Oklahoma State, those types of games. And Chris Kleiman, when's the last time he lost 2 games in a row? It's been a while, right? So, and I know he didn't lose to KU, but it kind of, the way that they played was worthy of a loss. And so I think that what you mentioned, Fitz, I can get that a little bit with maybe just trying to get through until the bye week. But if you're K-State staff, you say, hey guys, you give us 60 minutes. I know we're tired. We've been on the road a lot, different time zones. Give us 60 minutes here, and then we're going to have some nice time off to relax and have a good chance to set ourselves up for a Big 12 title if we can get out of Houston with the win here I think it was a 12.5-point favorite last I checked.
Okay, you brought up sports betting, so I need to point out that we're going early tonight because your Pittsburgh Steelers and Big B Steelers are playing on Monday Night Football. Have you laid any bets on the Steelers?
So actually, right when this gets over is when I'm going to put that same game parlay together. Ooh. But you already know for the spread here who we're going to go with. So Mike Tomlin in primetime, don't bet against that.
Okay, I know you've been a Steelers fan for a long time, like 3 years. So it's impressive. But that's why Big B isn't here. He's off hosting his Steelers show right now. Joey, give me the percentage that you think, the chance that K-State runs the table and ends at 11-1 and with just that one loss to BYU in the schedule.
A percentage chance. I'm not a mathematician, and my podcast is notorious for not being a math pod, but
you're a journalist at heart.
75. Yeah, that's why I went to the AQ Miller School of Journalism. Yes. So I didn't have to take a calculus class. I'm going to go 75% chance that they run the table. That Iowa State game really scares me. Just I feel good about the matchup against Cincy. I feel good about the matchup against Arizona State and Houston, and Iowa State. Realistically, that's the big behemoth, scary thing at the end of the road, and that could be the one thing standing in between you and a berth to Arlington. And it scares me. It scares me. Mm-hmm. I think there's a likelihood that you could drop that game, but I think there's something to be said for this team when they lose games the previous season to opponents that rout them. like Iowa State last year, or routing them isn't exactly the appropriate terminology there, but teams that beat them the year before that you get another opportunity against, this team always tends to deliver and have, they're going to say they treat every game equally, but they're going to have that game circled. They're going to have the game against Iowa State circled at the end of the season, just because of what happened with Abu Sama scoring, however many touchdowns he did
17
last year. And I think he just scored another one while we were talking.
Yes.
Fitz,
real
can I
quick
jump
here.
in?
Absolutely. Jump in.
I've got a number here. This is
Yes.
so it was to win all 4 games. I didn't mishear that, right?
No,
All
yeah,
four.
to finish out with all
I
4.
think you are on cocaine right now, Mr. Cocaine Willie. I got ESPN's FPI pulled up right here. 15.4% chance to win out. Now that's could be skewed one way or another, but to win all 4 of those games, I mean, it's going to be tough. In theory, I love it, but it's not as always easy as it seems.
So this is my question, Gills. Can you change that formula and make it to be 10-1 going to Ames? Because really, like, I think what the question should come down to is this team going to be 10-1 with a chance to win 1 game and make it to Arlington? What would the percentages say on that? Because I'm asking you, Gilbert, because I don't know if you have that pulled up right now.
I'm sure you can maybe find that, but I take after Fitz and I'm lazy, so I'm not going to do that.
That's my guy.
I think, guys, if that's not the case, something would have to have gone horribly wrong, because they're going to be they're a double-digit favorite against Houston. They're probably going to be a double-digit favor against Cincinnati, and they're probably going to be a double-digit favor against Arizona State and Cincinnati. So realistically, guys, if they don't win these next 3 games, something has gone horribly wrong. Would you all agree with me on that?
I would agree with you. But again, for K-State to hold a tiebreaker over Iowa State, they need to lose 3 times. Considering we're talking about Iowa State beating Kansas State for a second loss. And that's not going to happen. Here's their schedule. By the way, they're done with bye weeks. They play the rest of the way. Texas Tech is on Saturday on ESPN at 2:30 p.m. They go to Kansas, which is not at Kansas. It's at Arrowhead, and the half that place will be Iowa State fans or more. So I don't even consider that a home game for KU. Cincinnati comes into Ames. They're tough. Then they go to Utah, and then K-State. There's not 3 losses on there. There's no way. So at this point, you're right, Cole. K-State just got to pick them off and then worry about that last one when it comes, because I think you're right. That's the one that drives it down, because there's, if you take a 90% chance, a 95% chance of winning the next 3, and then you add in like a 45% chance to win the last one, it probably adds up to about 15% overall. That's my math for today, and I pulled something while doing that. Wally, do you think this team can do it?
I mean, I think they can do it. I don't feel great about it. So with the Houston game, I feel pretty confident, like we've talked about, and I hope this isn't going to get like clipped like 2012 Baylor. But like that feels like one that they should be able to get out of there with. And honestly, maybe playing the way they did against KU was a good thing, that they don't overlook the Houston Cougars, right? So that's kind of the one road game. I like the fact that Cincinnati and Arizona State are playing better than we imagined, because I don't think you overlook those games, and that you get the added perk that they're at home.
Yep.
The Iowa State game is kind of what it comes down to for me, and I feel like they're the best team in the Big 12 right now. I feel like I would put them over K-State. I'd put them over BYU. Tom Haycock is just scary as a defensive coordinator, and having to go up there cold on the road, but as Joey said, you got to like, in a way, the way that the game went last year, because K-State is going to be so pissed off coming into that game. So that kind of makes me like the chances a little bit more. I don't know if I would go as high as Joey. The thing that scares me, Fitz, and as you guys were talking, I was just going through Wikipedia, going back, trying to find it. Do you know the last time K-State won its last 4 regular season games was? where they went unbeaten in the month of November? Because
Wait,
again,
was
I'm not talking bowl games. I'm just saying regular season undefeated.
Was it 2016 when they or 2015? What was the year where they started and they won out?
0-3 in the conference or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it? I mean, and again, some of these they got beat by teams they were supposed to get beat by, ranked teams or what have you. So I mean, there were some years where you could say, well, they beat all the teams they were supposed to beat, right? Which is kind of what we're talking about here. But again, there's that Iowa State team looming that should still be ranked. You're asking them to win, be unblemished in the month of November. Any final guesses?
No, I have no idea.
2011.
2003.
Wow.
2003. They've gotten clipped at some point along the way in the month of November, at least once, every year since 2003. Now, the blessing here is kind of what we've talked about all year, and it goes back to what Gills was saying with Asa Newsome, is this team's depth is arguably as good, if not better, than any team since 2003, right? I mean, they've kind of been healthy for the most part, and the guys that haven't been as healthy, they've been able to rotate guys in and still make. I mean, they got out of Colorado with third stringers playing in the secondary. So, I mean, it's possible if they're at full strength, that they can go into Ames and win. Historically speaking, that I don't know. It's tough for me to go all out on that one. Hard to go higher than what, 50-50?
2003. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I can't get behind the last year's Iowa State game really mattering much for this team. And here's why. K-State lost that game because guys like Will Lee was missing tackles left and right. Will Howard had made up his mind really that he was going to transfer, right? So if it was it'd be one thing if those the guys that are with K-State right now are the ones that got beaten down, but the ones that really got beat or stumped against Iowa State, they're gone. They're not here anymore.
Yeah, that's true. And I want to point out that 2003, I both could see my belt buckle and I had hair. So maybe all that'll come back if they run November here. One final thing before we close up shop here. I saw probably my most, I don't want to say favorite, but the guy that I think is most reliable in the sports writing space, Brett McMurphy, put out his own playoff picks. And I saw he had BYU in at 11, and I got excited. I'm like, cool, he's got 2 teams in from the Big 12. And then I realized, no, he doesn't. BYU is the Big 12 champion, seeded 11th because they didn't get one of the top 4 buys, thanks to Miami being good. That just seems completely absurd to me, particularly if a team like BYU is unbeaten. I mean, that's just silly. But we need to revisit this. We've talked about this. And Joey, I'll let you bite this off because I'd love to know your opinion. Do you think the Big 12 actually has a chance to get 2 teams in the playoff, or is that just done because K-State dropped after a victory? Iowa State dropped in the AP poll after a bye. I think the nation is concluding that the Big 12 sucks because Utah, Oklahoma State, and others we thought would be good aren't good. So thus the conference must suck, setting aside that Colorado has turned into a really good football team and BYU is too.
I think the only scenario is if you have Iowa State win out and play BYU, or you have K-State win out and they play BYU, and it's an undefeated BYU team that loses to a K-State team with 1 loss, because that's what we saw play out with TCU and K-State 2 years ago. Right. So I think that's the only situation. Those are the only 2 situations, is if you have an undefeated Iowa State and BYU team playing in Arlington against each other, or you have K-State beat BYU and their only loss is to BYU in the regular season. BYU's only loss is to K-State in Arlington. I think that's the only situation where you get 2 teams in. I just think, unfortunately, the national perception is that the Big 12 is garbage and chaos, and that's frustrating. And I don't think that should be the case. But you mentioned Miami. Is Miami even a good team? I mean, the ACC is helping them win all their games. So I don't know.
ACC is a train wreck outside of them. I mean, you brought in SMU, not even a power conference school, and Cal, barely a power conference football program, and they're both in great shape. One of them might play Miami. It's just insane how how they're getting a pass with their schedule, even though being in the ACC. Wally, final thoughts on the playoff potential of this conference.
I just wanted to go because I'm glad Joey brought up the ACC, because to me that's the league that I'm looking at, right? It's like they're not going to go soft on the Big Ten. They're not going to go soft on the SEC. So to me, where the Big 12 can potentially make some moves, right, is with the ACC. But I'm looking at the ACC. I know Clemson's had a really good year. Miami, Pittsburgh, the Fighting Nate Matlax, man, 7-0. So Nate made a good choice with his decision to be a Panther. But I'm looking. Hang on. Okay, so yes, Pittsburgh did. Clemson did, kind of. Well, I guess they still got Pitt. Miami, though, they have not played a ranked team this year. I'm looking at their schedule. They've not, granted, they're undefeated. They haven't beaten anyone of value. And the remaining games are Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. None of whom I expect to be ranked. Duke is the highest of any of them at 6-2, and they're not ranked. So to me, I don't know how that helps with the Big 12. If Miami and Clemson run the table, but I guess you're kind of hoping for some anarchy in the ACC. Somebody gets clipped late in the year, but that's what's crazy to me. I don't see how the ACC is getting the teams that they're getting in over outside of maybe brands.
It's brands, and again, that brings
eyeballs.
up Colorado. I mean, if they run the table at 10-2 and some chaos happens, I can see the committee putting them in, even if they're the fourth best team in the Big 12, just because of the intangibles of TV ratings and national brand with Coach Prime being there and all that nonsense that shouldn't be part of the decision, but clearly is. Cole, thoughts on the playoff for the Big 12?
I'm going to give you the perfect scenario for the Big 12. And maybe it is not the most realistic, but I'm going to give you the perfect scenario for the Big 12. Okay. BYU wins out their regular season games. They finish at 12-0. Kansas State wins its next 3. Iowa State wins its next, what do they have, 4? So K-State and Iowa State play. Kansas State wins. That puts Kansas State at 11-1, Iowa State at 11-1 out of the Big 12 championship game, and BYU in the Big 12 championship game at 12-0. Colorado does not play BYU or Iowa State. They went out to finish 10-2. So you have a 10-2 Colorado. You have an 11-1 Iowa State. You have an 11-1 K-State, and you have a 12-0 BYU. Kansas State then wins the Big 12 championship game to get to 12-1. That would make Kansas State at 12-1, BYU at 12-1, Iowa State at 11-1, and Colorado at 10-2. If you do not get at least 2 teams in the college football playoff with those 4 records, then we need to completely reevaluate the college football playoff. And guess what, guys? Every single game the rest of the way, those teams that I just said will probably be favored outside of K-State and Ames. So, I mean, guys, I think all of that's very realistic and can happen. And so I want it to happen because I want to see this conference have success. And I think all 4 of these teams at the top of the conference are pretty dang good football teams.
Yep.
Cole brings up a good point there that fits that we're so focused on the BYU Iowa State thing, right? That Colorado is kind of a team that I think K-State fans should be kind of quietly rooting for, because they're, we just talked about it with brand identity. They're the team that if you go kind of outside of the Big 12 landscape to folks that are just watching college football, that when you ask them, what Big 12 games have you watched? What Big 12 teams have you watched? I bet you most of them have watched probably more Colorado than they have K-State and Iowa State and BYU. So if you have, what would you say, Cole, 10-2?
Yep.
If you have a 10-2 Colorado team, that bodes well for K-State, so long as K-State does the other things that
Very
they
good
need.
point. Ryan Gilbert, I'm going to give you a really hard question to answer as we wrap this thing up. You will be in Houston alone on Friday night because the boss is sneaking off to a concert in Tulsa before coming to Houston. What are your big plans? Houston's a fun city. You can go to a shopping mall or a strip mall or just hang out on the corner.
Well, I got a few friends that live down there, so maybe meet up with them for a few drinks. But I'm most excited to be in a hotel room for a night without Timothy, Scott Fitzgerald snoring his butt off for 8 hours of the night.
That came back and bit me really badly. Yes. Keep me away from the alcohol on Friday nights.
What's your middle name?
George.
That's close enough.
Timothy Scott Fitzgerald. That's just absolutely wonderful.
Scott,
Brian, you don't even know who that is. You don't even know what the first name of it's F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Should I just go by T. Scott? Oh, that sounds like D. Scott.
We already have one.
Confusing.
I was going to say, I love Fritch, and I'm not trying to put him on blast here at all, but clearly Gills did not ever have a room with D. Scott Fritchen on road trips.
Yes.
You want to talk about snoring. I love you, D.
Yep. Joey, give us the Cocaine Willie podcast schedule. When can people listen to you, watch you, hook them up?
Yeah, so we go live every Tuesday, usually every Tuesday, right around 7:30 Central Time. We publish to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, anywhere you can find your podcast. And tomorrow night, we're going to have Ryan Monceau from GoCougs.com is going to be hopping on to help us preview the Cougars this weekend. But we'll have that. And then every Thursday, we publish a weekly Locks episode where we kind of just talk ball. And we've got a Big 12 fantasy league that we've done this year, which has been fun and interesting. And that's where you can find us at Cocaine Willie as well on all social media.
Very good. Boys, thank you very much. Made it over 1,000 live viewers. Thank you so much for everyone who stepped in here tonight. That's going to do it for us. And also, I need to remind Ryan Gilbert that Houston's mascot is actually the animal, not another form of Cougars. I know that's your favorite form.
Thank you for watching the K-State Insiders. This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production.